Welcome to Her Remarkable History. Remember, to support our channel, please subscribe. The Burke and Hare murders. One of the most haunting serial killers in Scotland were William Burke and William Hare, who operated in Edinburgh. At the time, the city was a leading centre for anatomy and study, and the law allowed for cadavers to be dissected. However, the corpses used must have come from only those who came from prison and died inside, from orphans, from those who took their own life, and also those who were condemned to die and were executed. There was a shortage of corpses. Such was the need to carry out so many experiments that a business emerged around this. Resurrection men were those who snatched bodies, sometimes even from the freshly dug graves. A body which would have been okay to dissect could only have been in the grounds a few days before decay set in, so bodysnatchers were common in the Edinburgh graveyards, stalking the evenings. However, Burke and Hare were a little more inventive. They were two men who focused on murdering rather than pure body snatching. They noticed a gap in the market and struck with devastating effect. Edinburgh's colleges were full of students who sought to learn from professional surgeons such as Dr. Robert Knox, who operated dissection classes and also offered courses to students who paid a lot of money to watch proceedings, often public dissections. In the early 19th century, England fell under the Murder Act, which allowed doctors to only use corpses of executed criminals for medical studies, and this also led to a shortage of bodies in not just Scotland, but in England. Because of this, the price of cadavers and corpses rose exponentially. This only encouraged the body snatchers and men like Burke and Hare, who would stop at nothing to make money. Burke and Hare were Irish, from Ulster, and they arrived in Scotland in 1818 from Ireland following the famine. They both worked together on the Union Canal, and Burke became a cobbler and Hare worked in agriculture. Burke himself had a relationship with a prostitute named Helen MacDougall, and they lived together, and Hare lived with Maggie Laird, a widow. Maggie and her late husband owned a run-down boarding house in Tanner's Close in Edinburgh, and following his death, Hare and Maggie continued to run the small hostel-style accommodation. Maggie knew Burke also, as she worked with them on the canal, and she invited Burke and Helen to rent a room in her boarding house when she saw them desperately selling their clothes for money. At the start, the two couples lived together in the house, and despite drinking hard and dancing, they lived together well in relative peace. However, the first death in this story would simply just be an act of nature. One of their boarders, a man named Donald, became ill and died while staying there. Donald owed a significant amount of back rent that he never paid, and Burke and Hare stole his corpse from its coffin before it was interred. They replaced Donald with bags of bark from a nearby garden, and then to recoup the money from the lost rent, they sold his body to Dr. Robert Knox for over £7, which was a decent amount of money. Seeing the financial gain, Burke and Hare then began to turn their boarding house into a house of mass murder. Their first visit was either a woman named Abigail Simpson or an elderly man named Joseph, and they suffocated the lodgers and then sold the body to Dr. Knox for a flat fee of £10. It's clear that their partners may have also been complicit in the murders. They began to hunt Edinburgh's pubs and taverns for victims for their illicit crimes and activities. Both charming men, they managed to have a laugh with their victims in the bars, before convincing them to head back to the boarding house on Tanner's Close for more drinks, or for a night to stay. They would coerce them home and then murder them in the same manner, and then take their corpses back to Dr. Knox, who would then perform his dissections. The men continued their murder spree, focusing on the people of Edinburgh's society who would be simply forgotten. They focused on drifters and drunks. However, as time went on, they got bolder with their murders, and with this became more careless and sloppy. One of their victims was a beautiful prostitute named Mary Paterson, who was missed in the local area, and suspicion emerged of a murderer on the loose. Also, they murdered a mentally ill 18-year-old boy named Jamie Wilson, nicknamed Daft Jamie by the locals. He was a popular figure in the old town of Edinburgh, and the locals looked out for him, and when he disappeared, suspicion arose. Margaret had managed to lure Daft Jamie into the boarding house when he was passed over to Burke and Hare, who got him drunk and then smothered him. When Jamie went missing, the locals worried that something bad had happened, and word of the missing young man spread quickly. It's clear that possibly Dr. Knox knew what was happening as he removed Jamie's head and feet before the class went ahead. Burke ended up moving out of Tanner's Close, and he stayed nearby, sharing their home with another couple known as the Greys. Margaret Docherty's murder was the one that failed the money-making scheme, as Burke found the Irish woman begging in a tavern. He then took her back to his place, claiming that he was related to her. However, before killing her, he said to the Greys that she needed a place to stay and convinced them to go to Tanner's Close for the evening. When the Greys returned, they found Docherty's dead body stuffed in with straw mattress, and then they informed the police. The killers then placed Docherty's corpse even under the police's nose and delivered it to Dr. Knox. The police found blood on the straw bed, and Burke and Hare and their partners were arrested. Overall, Burke and Hare had murdered at least 16 people, but some historians claim that their actual kill count ranged up to 30. Prosecutors had a lot of quality evidence against the murders, but no eyewitness testimonies to completely confirm the case beyond reasonable doubt. They managed to strike a deal with William Hare, and he turned witness for the Crown to testify his murdering partner in exchange for immunity. Hare said Burke was the true mastermind and was responsible for all of the murders. He went on trial on December 1828 for the murders of Margaret Docherty, Jamie Wilson and Mary Paterson. They knew they could secure the guilty verdict, but they did not have evidence for all 16 murders. At the trial, Dr. Knox claimed that Burke and Hare had told him they brought unclaimed corpses of deceased people from boarding houses, and he simply turned a blind eye, as he was more focused on his classes and students. Burke was found guilty and was sentenced to death for his crimes. On the 28th of January 1829, in front of a huge crowd, he was brought in front of the population of Edinburgh for his execution. The crowd was as big as 25,000, and many peered from windows, and people even rented out their rooms to give onlookers the best view. In front of the crowd he was hanged, and in a strange act of revenge, Burke's corpse was then handed over to public dissection. A riot even broke out. Such was the wish to see the mass murderer to be cut into small pieces, and after this, a number of gruesome artefacts attributing to Burke were made. His preserved skeleton can still be seen, as can a book made from the tanned skin of him, and also a death mask. Hare was released from custody, and it's believed he was recognised a number of times by members of the public, who they sought to take justice into their own hands. He eventually was smuggled out of the country, it's believed. So the story of Burke and Hare murders is incredibly interesting. It's the story of two men who would stop at nothing to make as much money as they could, and would even commit horrific crimes to take advantage of the thriving cadaver business in one of Europe's capitals of anatomical study. They had 16 known victims, and it's clear that there were more people involved in the practice than just the two, and doubt does emerge on Robert Knox, the professor and doctor who carried out the dissections. It's more probable that he suspected that the people's bodies he received were victims of murder. However, the way in which they were killed through smothering didn't leave any obvious signs on the body. Today, the murders of Burke and Hare still haunt Edinburgh's old town. Thank you for watching, and to support, please subscribe to Her Remarkable History. Thank you.